Hello, everyone. So for the past couple of weeks, we have been learning about globalization and the pros and cons of cultural exchanges between East Asia and the world. In this presentation, I would like to explain to you guys why I think um, globalization and cultural exchanges between East Asia and the world are positive rather than negative. So, as we all should know by now, globalization describes the interaction and integration of people, companies, and governments across the world. And globalization is made possible by technological advances, in areas such as transportation or technology, etc. So, a little bit about the history. Uh, well, the first instance of globalization in East Asia. So, in the early 13th century, merchants such as Marco Polo, for example, um, were some of the first Europeans to travel to East Asia, and they did so um, in order to trade goods by using what we know as the Silk Road with China. However, some 300 years later, um, an Italian Jesuit named Matteo Ricci began a 30-year mission in China. And what Ricci intended to do was to spread his religion using cultural influences in order to do so. So basically, what he did was he went to China and noticed how the rich people of China dressed. And so he copied that. And by doing so, he was able to spread his religion easier. And Matteo Ricci also expanded the Chinese knowledge of the rest of the world. So this image on the left side is a map of ancient China according to the Chinese. However, when Ricci arrived, he decided that he would try to expand the Chinese's knowledge of the rest of the world, and so he made a more detailed and updated map for them, one that looks a little bit more like what we know today. So, an example of the spread of globalization would be the so-called trade of ideas. For example, in the late 19th century, Japan decided that in order to make improvements to their army, they would have to send diplomats around the world to countries like the United States and um, countries in Europe. Um, they did this in order so that they could learn from uh, the fighting tactics of Western countries. And by doing so, they were able to strengthen their own military. This mission was known as the Iwakura mission. And then another example would be Tom Cruise's character in The Last Samurai, right? So he was sent to Japan originally to help strengthen their army. However, he got captured by some samurai warriors, and while in captivity, he learned how to become a samurai. And so he was able to mix in newer fighting styles with older, more traditional fighting styles, and that allowed him to become a better warrior overall. So an example of a Westerner being inspired by an East Asian idea would be Vincent van Gogh and his relationship with Japanese ukiyo-es. So this painting here is an example of a traditional Japanese ukiyo-e. Some characteristics of ukiyo-es would be, well, usually they have brighter colors, and a lot of times they depict a woman, as we can see here, or nature as well, which is not really depicted in this ukiyo-e right here. So, as we can see here, this is an example of one of Van Gogh's earlier paintings, and he depicts more impoverished people eating potatoes. That's why he calls this painting the Potato Eaters, and he depicts them by using darker, dull colors, which are not very they're not very appealing to the eye, right? However, after he got wind of ukiyo-es, he became very inspired by them, and he started using those aspects that I mentioned earlier in his paintings. So, for example, as we see here, we've got a woman in a traditional Japanese dress. We've got much brighter colors. And then also in the background, we have the aspect of nature involved. So next, I'd like to talk about some of the different ways that Asian pop culture has began to infiltrate the American society that we know as today. So my first example is anime. I'm sure most of you guys all watched cartoons as children. I know I watched a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon with my brother when I was a kid. So a lot of these cartoons were originally inspired by anime and manga as well. Another example would be K-pop, which took inspiration from American ideals such as Motown and Michael Jackson, and combined them with their own styles of fashion, hair, dance, etc., in order to form a new, more exotic cultural phenomenon in the US. And finally, we also have mukbang, which is a Korean invention. In mukbang, there are usually two celebrities that have a virtual dinner date. And mukbangs have become very popular in the US, especially now during these pandemic times. So some statistics in regards to K-pop. So this graph here shows the amount of popularity K-pop has gained throughout the world. Each bubble here represents how popular K-pop is inside country. And if you notice here, the US's bubble is bigger than that of any other non-Asian country. And I believe that this is because, like I said earlier, K-pop took inspiration from a lot of American ideas and made it their own sort of exotic new music genre, which allowed it to become very popular in the US as well. So this chart here shows the percentage of YouTube views for K-pop bands worldwide. Of course, this is only for K-pop related videos. And unsurprisingly, it seems the band BTS comes out on top with about 20.9% of all K-pop music video views worldwide. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about cultural exchanges. So a cultural exchange can be defined as the sharing of different ideas, traditions, religious beliefs, and knowledge with or in between two people or more people from completely different ethnic or cultural backgrounds. So, for example, someone from the US might have a cultural exchange with someone from, say, Europe or China or South America or Africa, etc. And this picture here represents cultural exchange by depicting a ton of people from different ethnic and cultural backgrounds holding hands, symbolizing peace, which is one thing that cultural exchanges can lead to is a more peaceful world and a better cultural understanding. So a few examples of cultural exchanges would be, well, one, we've got language exchanges, which that's basically when a learner of one language meets up with a native speaker of said language who is also learning um, the native language of the first person, and they speak to each other in each other's languages. And then also being an exchange student is another good example of a cultural exchange, I would think. It just so happens that I was actually an exchange student. My senior year of high school, I spent 10 months as a Rotary Youth Exchange student in a small area of Japan called Niigata, which is in the northwest corner of Japan. And while I was in Niigata, I lived with Japanese families. I went to school in Japan, and I got to meet a ton of interesting Japanese people. And while I was there, I got to learn a lot about their culture because I was, very well immersed in their culture. Some examples of some of the things that I learned would be their different styles of clothing. So basically what they wear to school versus what they wear on the streets, or what they wear at um, traditional ceremonies, for example. And then their manners are different in Japan as well. So what we as Americans view as respectful or disrespectful is different from what Japanese people view as respectful or disrespectful. For example, in the US, a lot of people, including myself, tend to wear shoes inside, their houses. However, in Japan, that is very rude. And another rude thing in Japan would be, um, you know, making too much noise on public transit, which is not necessarily an abnormal thing to do here in the US. And we also have honorific language in Japan. So in English, I do not think we really have a ton of honorific language. However, in Japanese, um, they do have honorific language, or honorific words that are only supposed to be used when you speak to your elders in order to show respect. So, my final thoughts, I believe that through globalization and cultural exchanges, we not only learn how to appreciate foreign cultures, but we also are able to take certain aspects from foreign cultures and mix them in with our own, with aspects from our own cultures. And by doing that, we um, we we improve upon ourselves and upon our societies. For example, you have Tom Cruise's character in the Last Samurai, and you got me when I went on exchange. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and thank you very much for teaching me a lot about Asian history and how it connects to our world today. I really enjoyed I really enjoyed taking this course.